5,000 years ago, someone pressed a reed into damp clay and wrote that the wisest god in the universe had kept something hidden, that he had built a door, and then sealed it. That's not a metaphor. That's what the tablets say. In southern Iraq, beneath mounds that took archaeologists a century to decipher, lay the oldest city ever mentioned in any text. It was called Eridu, and at its heart stood a temple that was rebuilt 18 times on the exact same spot, over 3,000 years, without anyone moving the site even a meter. 18 generations, 18 versions of the same building, all pointing to the same ground, as if what lay beneath mattered more than what was being built above. The tablets say that Enki lived beneath it, and that what he guarded wasn't gold, weapons, or the secret names of the gods. It was the complete manual for how civilization works, the decrees that organize existence, the knowledge that separates a scattered tribe from an organized city. And at a time that the texts precisely record, that access became unavailable. If the oldest records of humankind describe something that was deliberately sealed, and no one has fully explained why, stay until the end. What you're about to hear doesn't end where you think it will. Eridu exists. That's no longer a hypothesis. The Tel Abu Shahrain site, 24 kilometers southwest of ancient Ur in southern Iraq, was identified by British archaeologist John George Taylor in 1854. In 1946, Iraqi archaeologist Fuad Safar and his colleague Seton Lloyd began large-scale excavations. What they found, beneath the ziggurat was a temple. Beneath that one, another. And beneath that one, yet another. 18 superimposed architectural levels, each built directly on top of the ruins of the one before it, at the same central point, over 3,000 years. The foundations of each version of the temple were built on crushed shells, coral, and gypsum. This was no accidental choice in a desert city. Whoever built each version knew exactly what had been there before and chose the same materials. It was a technical tradition passed down with deliberate precision for millennia. The full results of that excavation were not published until 1981, a delay that the researchers themselves justified by the stratigraphic complexity of what they found. The city functioned until approximately 600 BCE, and in 2025, a joint team from the universities of Rome La Sapienza and Strasbourg, which had resumed work at the site in 2019, published in the journal Antiquity the mapping of more than 4,000 irrigation canals and 700 farms around the site, confirming that Eridu was for millennia a center of hydraulic engineering of a complexity that is still being understood. The Sumerian king list says that when kingship descended from heaven, it first descended here, before Uruk, before Nippur, and at the heart of that origin stood a temple dedicated to Enki, whose sacred number was 40, whose domain included fresh water, wisdom, writing, architecture, magic, and creation. The temple was called Abzu, House of the Deep Waters. It was built, time and again, on the exact edge of a marsh, as if marking the place where the visible world ended and what lay beneath began. To understand what Enki kept, one must understand what the Abzu was. In Sumerian cosmology, the universe had 3 levels: above and the sky, in the middle Ki, the earth, and below, the Abzu, the primordial ocean of fresh water beneath the ground, the source of every spring, every river, every well. The water that sprang from the earth did not come from rain. It came from this subterranean ocean. Some traditions held that the souls of the dead traveled through these same waters. The Abzu was not just water. It was the memory of the world. The scholar Samuel Noah Kramer, who worked at the University of Pennsylvania and whose work on the Penn Museum collections defined the modern understanding of Sumerian texts, pointed out something that subsequent researchers have continued to confirm. The standards established at Eridu were faithfully repeated in every Sumerian temple that followed. Not partially, completely. The Mesopotamian Gwendolyn Leake in Mesopotamia, the invention of the city, argues that Eridu was not an antecedent of Sumerian civilization. It was its template. There's a detail that almost no video on this topic mentions. Extensive deposits of fish bones were found in the oldest levels of the Eridu temple, dating to the Ubaid period, between 5400 and 4000 BCE. These weren't kitchen scraps. They were deliberately placed ritual offerings. And the texts say that the beings who emerged from the Abzu to teach humanity were Paradu fish, half human, half fish. The people of Eridu left fish offerings for them in the temple of the god from whom these beings emerged, 5,000 years before anyone wrote a single line about them. Enki possessed a characteristic consistently repeated in the texts. He was the most intelligent of the pantheon. Not the most powerful, not the oldest. The most intelligent. And this intelligence manifested itself in his knowing what the other gods wanted before they knew how to ask for it. He had access to the decrees that governed existence before those decrees were even put into practice. These decrees had a name, the me. The me's are the most unsettling thing about all of this, and also what videos on this topic go through the fastest. There are more than 100. The complete list appears on 4 different tablets, but the fragmentary state of the texts means that scholars have only been able to recover with certainty a little over 60. Samuel Noah Kramer, in the Sumerians, published by the University of Chicago Press in 1963, documented what those decrees included: kingship, divinity, the throne of the kingdom, descent to the underworld and return from it, the art of the carpenter, the art of the metalworker, legal and slanderous language, heroism, power, the destruction of cities, lamentation, joy of heart, music, writing, and the scribe's craft. Every domain of civilized existence. And the list includes the destruction of cities, slander, lamentation. Not just the forces that build, but also those that destroy. The me were not a list of virtues. They were a complete map of how a civilization functions, including its mechanisms of collapse. Kramer noted an inexplicable gap in the list between the art of metallurgy and the craft of scribe. The tablets corresponding to that fragment are too deteriorated to be read. What was written in those lines remains unknown. All of that was stored in the Abzu, in the temple of Enki in Eridu. What scholars point out is something the texts don't fully explain. The me weren't abstract concepts. They were, according to the texts themselves, physical objects that could be held, transported, and stolen. The myth of Inanna and Enki, inscribed around 2000 BCE, describes the goddess traveling to the Abzu to receive them from Enki on the pure table, the table of heaven. He hands them over in a state of euphoria. When he recovers and tries to reclaim them, he sends sea monsters to stop Inanna's boat. They don't arrive in time. The me were already in Uruk. This story has a precise implication. The me could leave the Abzu, and they could also return. The most disturbing text is not that of Inanna and Enki. It is the Atrahasis, 3 tablets in cuneiform script dated to 1700 BCE. The Eridu Genesis, a fragmentary tablet held at the Penn Museum in Philadelphia under the number CBS 10673, from the same period. Both texts preserve a myth based on oral traditions that date back to at least 2000 BCE. What those texts record is the moment when Enki made his final decision regarding humanity. Enlil and the Divine Council had decided to wipe out the human race. The reason given in the texts: humans had proliferated so much, made so much noise, that the gods could not sleep. The council ordered the flood. Enki was bound by oath not to warn any mortal directly, so he didn't do it directly. He approached the wall of a reed house and spoke to it, knowing that his servant Ziusadra, Atrahasis in the Akkadian version, the supremely wise, was on the other side. The words the text preserves are: dismantle the house, build a boat, cover it like the Abzu so the sun cannot see inside. Bring birds, fish, animals, your family. The water came for 7 days and 7 nights. When Enlil discovered survivors, he was furious. Enki's response was direct: I made sure that life survived. The argument held. Humanity continued. But the age of the Apkallu had ended. The Apkallu, called Abgal in Sumerian, are the 7 antediluvian sages. Half human, half fish, created by Enki, who emerged from the Abzu to advise the first kings. Their role was not to rule. It was to transport the me upwards. After the flood, in the poem of Era, the god Marduk asks, where are the 7 sages of the Apsu, the pure Paradu fish, endowed with sublime wisdom? The text indirectly answers, they had returned to the depths. The door was closing. There is something that the competing video on this topic does not mention. and that academic studies accurately document. Priests trained in the ancient law of Eridu continued to be employed at the Assyrian court centuries after Eridu as a city had ceased to function. This is documented in inscriptions from the Assyrian period, between the 9th and 7th centuries BCE. Eridu had ceased to be a living city around 600 BCE, but the knowledge associated with its temple was passed down in priestly schools that existed even when the temple itself was in ruins. Not as history, but as active knowledge that was taught and applied. In his analysis of Assyrian mystical texts published by Oxford University Press, researcher Alastair Livingstone documented that priests performing the Bit Mesri rituals, incantations from the 1st millennium BCE, explicitly invoked the 7 Apkallu of Eridu. The third tablet in this series mentions the sages by name: Yuin, Wanduga, and Mejiga, and Megalama, and Mebulaga, Ananlilda, and Utu Abzu. The last is described as guardian of the secrets of the Abzu, not metaphorically but as a specific title. In 2025, the team led by J. Jothery of Cambridge University published in Antiquity the results of an analysis of satellite images from the Corona program combined with drone footage of the Eridu region. More than 4,000 irrigation canals and 700 farms were found, providing evidence of water management that required large-scale administrative centralization. The hydraulic complexity that the texts attribute to the Apkallu people now has a physical correlate that archaeologists are still processing. Let's return to the fish bones. The ones Safar and Lloyd found in the Ubaid period levels, 5400 to 4000 BCE, in the oldest layers of the temple. Deliberate offerings in the oldest building at the oldest site in Mesopotamia. The texts call the Apkallu Paradu fish. Archaeology and texts point in the same direction from angles separated by 5,000 years. The Tablet of Destinies. It's not the same as the Me. In Sumerian mythology, they are two different things. The Me are the individual decrees, the more than 100 domains that organize civilization. The Tablet of Destinies is something else entirely. The Sumerian poem of Ninurta and the tortoise places it specifically with Enki in the deep waters beneath the earth. In the Babylonian Enuma Elish, whoever possesses this tablet governs the universe. It confers authority over the destinies of gods and mortals. It is not a decree among decrees. It is the authority that validates all the others. And I was in the Abzu, with the Me, below Eridu. There is a detail in the poem of Ninurta and the tortoise that is rarely mentioned. The god Ninurta tries to take the tablet from the Abzu. Enki does not defend it violently. He creates a clay tortoise that traps the intruder. The tablet remains where it is. The Abzu has its own defenses. The door cannot be forced from the outside. What the texts say, taken together, is this. Before the flood, the Apkallu emerged from the Abzu and carried knowledge upward. What the myth calls bringing the Me to humanity was a literal movement, from the waters to the land. Each antediluvian king, according to the Sumerian king list, had an Apkallu as a personal advisor, not as a priest, but as a bearer of knowledge originating from a specific place. After the flood, they returned. The texts don't say that the Me disappeared. They say that the bearers disappeared. The myth of Inanna had already established that the Me could leave the Abzu. But what the complete set of texts implies is that after the flood, the movement reversed. What had left, returned. And the door remained on the other side. The most remarkable thing isn't the list of what was stored there. It's this. The building that marked that spot was rebuilt 18 times over 3,000 years. On the exact same spot without moving an inch. When Eridu ceased to function as a city, pilgrims continued to arrive for centuries. When the temple was in ruins, the priests of Eridu's law were the most respected in the courts of civilizations that had forgotten the city's name. They did not worship Enki in the abstract. They worshipped the specific place where his temple stood, because that place marked something that the texts described as still present, although no longer accessible in the same way. The clay tablets became the doorway. What lay beyond was recorded in cuneiform script, preserved for 4,000 years in the dry soil of southern Iraq. And what those texts say, with a consistency spanning centuries of writing in different languages and civilizations, is that there was a time when humanity had direct access to the entire system that organizes civilized existence. And that access was closed, deliberately, from within. There's a point that Mesopotamian literature scholars emphasize, one that rarely appears in popular videos. Marduk's question in the poem of Era isn't rhetorical in the sense of being merely ornamental. It's a question the text presents as unanswerable. The god who, in the Enuma Elish, received the Tablet of Destinies, the god who ruled the Babylonian cosmos, asks where the wise men are as if he didn't know, as if his omnipotence weren't enough to provide that answer. And the only explanation the collection of texts allows is that the Apkallu are where they've always been, in the Abzu beneath Eridu, behind a door that Enki himself designed so that it couldn't be opened from the outside. Here's what specifically changes after reading these texts carefully. The civilizations that came after Eridu, Akkad, Babylon, Assyria, knew they did not have access to the original source. Marduk inquires about the sages as one inquires about something lost. The Assyrian priests invoke them as one invokes an authority that can no longer answer in person. The writing schools of Mesopotamia taught the texts of Eridu as compositions of the highest level. The Decad, the 10 advanced compositions. Those who mastered them received the title of knower of the ancient law of Eridu. 3,000 years after Eridu functioned as a city, the Mesopotamians were still treating their knowledge as the highest attainable level. They hadn't surpassed the source. They were copying backward. The question the texts don't answer is why Enki decided to seal the gate. The tablets record the decision and its consequences for centuries. They don't explain the reason. Kramer pointed out that the figure of Enki as a deliberate guardian of knowledge is one of the most consistent in all Sumerian literature. There is no version of the myth where Enki shares the knowledge of the Abzu without restrictions. There is always a condition. There is always a limit. And after the flood, that limit remained in a place that later texts describe as unreachable. What remains open is whether the 18 reconstructions of the temple on the exact same spot were attempts to keep open a connection that the builders knew was closing. Eridu remains a mound in the desert of southern Iraq. The most recent excavations are comparing what the texts say was underneath it with what the ground says was around it. The question that comparison hasn't answered is the same one the texts left unanswered 4,000 years ago. There's something worth considering before we close this. The Sumerians did not have a word for myth as a synonym for a story that is not true. The texts describing the Abzu, the Mi, and the Apkallu were copied for centuries in the same schools where commercial records and diplomatic treaties were copied. They were treated as the same kind of knowledge, not as legends separate from reality, but as a record. What changes when you read that is not the history of Mesopotamia. What changes is the question one asks about what a civilization decides to preserve, and what it decides some shouldn't know. That question isn't just 5,000 years old. What do you think? Do you believe that there is knowledge that our own civilizations guard in the same way that Enki guarded the Mi? Accessible only to those who know where to look, sealed away from those who are not instructed on how to find it? If this kind of story piques your interest, subscribe and turn on notifications. The most unsettling mysteries aren't the ones without answers. They're the ones that have answers, but in a language that's been waiting 4,000 years for someone to decide to read them.